and thus such demoniac persons transmigrate life after life without any knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The sane man, however, is enlightened in the disciplic succession from Brahmaji, who was personally instructed by the Lord, or the disciplic succession from Arjuna, who was personally instructed by the Lord in the Bhagavad Gita. He accepts this statement of the Lord. Aham sarvasya prabhavo mata sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhava samanvita. The Lord is the original source of all emanations, and everything that is created, manifested, and annihilated exists by the energy of the Lord. The sane man who knows this is actually learned, and therefore he becomes a pure devotee of the Lord, engaged in transcendental loving service of the Lord. Although the reflectory energy of the Lord displays various illusions to the eyes of persons with a poor fund of knowledge, the sane person knows clearly that the Lord can act even from far, far beyond our vision. By his different energies, just as fire can diffuse heat and light from a distant place, in the medical science of the ancient sages, known as the Ayurveda, there is definite acceptance of the Lord's supremacy in the following words. Jagat yoner anichasya chid anandeka rupina pumso asti prakriti nitya pratichayeva bhasvataha achetanapi chaitanya yogena paramatmana akarod vishvam akhilam anityam natakakritam. There is one Supreme Person who is the progenitor of this cosmic manifestation, and whose energy acts as Prakriti, or the material nature, dazzling like a reflection. By such illusory action of Prakriti, even dead matter is caused to move by the cooperation of living entity of the Lord, and the material world appears like a dramatic performance to the ignorant eyes. The ignorant person, therefore, may even be a scientist or a physiologist in the drama of Prakriti, while the same person knows Prakriti as the illusory energy of the Lord. By such a conclusion, as confirmed by the Bhagavad Gita, it is clear that the living entities are also a display of the Lord's superior energy, Para Prakriti. Just as the material world is a display of the Lord's inferior energy, Apara Prakriti. The superior energy of the Lord cannot be as good as the Lord, although there is very little difference between the energy and the processor of the energy, or the fire and the heat. Fire is possessed of heat, but heat is not fire. The simple thing is not understood by the man with a poor fund of knowledge, who falsely claims that the fire and heat are the same. This energy of the fire, namely heat, is explained here as a reflection and not directly fire. Therefore, the living energy represented by the living entities is the reflection of the Lord, and never the Lord himself. Being the reflection of the Lord, the existence of the living entity is dependent on the Supreme Lord, who is the original light. This material energy may be compared to darkness, as actually it is darkness, and the activities of the living entities in the darkness are reflections of the original light. The Lord should be understood by the context of this verse. Non-dependence of both the energies of the Lord is explained as Maya, or illusion. No one can make a solution of the darkness of ignorance simply by the reflection of light. Similarly, no one can come out of material existence simply by the reflected light of the common man. One has to receive the light from the original light itself. The reflection of sunlight in the darkness is unable to drive out the darkness, but the sunlight outside the reflection can drive out the darkness completely. In darkness, no one can see the things in a room. Therefore, a person in the dark is afraid of snakes and scorpions, although there may not be such things. But in the light, the things in the room can be clearly seen, and the fear of snakes and scorpions is at once removed. Therefore, one has to take shelter of the light of the Lord, as in the Bhagavad Gita or the Srimad Bhagavatam, and not the reflective personalities who have no touch with the Lord. No one should hear Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam from a person who does not believe in the existence of the Lord. Such a person is already doomed, and any association with such a doomed person makes the associator also doomed. According to the Padma Purana, within the material compass, there are innumerable material universes, and all of them are full of darkness. Any living beings beginning from the Brahmas, there are innumerable Brahmas and innumerable universes, to the insignificant ant. All are born in darkness, and they require factual light from the Lord to see Him directly, just as the sun can be seen only by the direct light of the sun. No lamp or man-made torchlight, however powerful it may be, can help one see the sun. The sun reveals itself. Therefore, the action of different energies of the Lord, or the personality of Godhead Himself, can be realized by the light manifested by the causeless mercy of the Lord. The impersonalists say that God cannot be seen. God can be seen by the light of God and not by man-made speculations. Here the light is specifically mentioned as Vidyat, which is an order by the Lord to Brahma. This direct order of the Lord is a manifestation of His internal energy, and this particular energy is the means of seeing the Lord face to face. Not only Brahma, but anyone who may be graced by the Lord to see such merciful direct internal energy can also realize the personality of Godhead without any mental speculation. Jai. Finish the purport. Next the purport. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurve Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivashari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So we are continuing our discussion on Chatur Shloki Bhagavatam. We are on text 34, and so while reading this second half of the purport, there's one word that strikes out that's been used a lot by Prabhupada. Anyone want to take a guess? What is that verse that is being used quite a lot in the second half of the purport? Darkness. Yeah, we hear a lot of Prabhupada talk about darkness, quite a lot in the second half of the purport. So I just had a thought while reading the purport that we are all, the first thing before starting Bhagavatam, what we do is we sing this beautiful prayer. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurve Namaha. What does that mean? That means I was born in the darkest of ignorance. That's where it starts. I was born in the darkest of ignorance. And my spiritual master, with the torch of knowledge, has enlightened and opened my eyes. I offer my humble obeisances unto Him. That's correct? That's the translation of this beautiful verse that we recite before starting Bhagavatam. Why do we do that? Why are we reciting this beautiful verse before diving into this ocean of knowledge, transcendental knowledge? We do this because without the mercy of the spiritual master, we will be in the darkest of ignorance. Like Prabhupada is mentioning in the purport that one should not listen to Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita or any transcendental literature from non-devotees, people who are not devotees of the Lord, or people who are envious of the existence itself of the Supreme Lord. What happens when we listen from such people? What will happen? What do you think will happen? We will fall back in the darkest of ignorance, because those people are in the darkest of ignorance. The only person who's not in the darkest of ignorance is the person who has surrendered fully to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Because this knowledge wouldn't make sense to anyone. You know, I remember yesterday we had a little program and Rajanath Prabhu was talking about contradictions of Krishna. How Krishna's, all the pastimes of Krishna contradicts. You know, like sometimes he's doing this and the other thing he's doing that. So just like contradictory things he's been doing. So all this thing wouldn't make sense to a non-devotee. Because a non-devotee would just try to judge Krishna's pastimes with his own mundane intelligence that is not really intelligent. He will think by the senses. He'll think from the mind, and mind, as we all know, is based on experiences, and it's a sense that reflects, that reacts to things and emotions and situations. So a person without the real knowledge of the Supreme Lord does not know or does not have any real connection with the Lord. Similarly, just for example, if I try to talk about a person, you know, I would only talk about a person if I know that person very well. That's only when I can explain someone to someone what that person is like. If I don't know anything about that person, how am I going to explain it to others? Does that make sense? So this is what we have to know, that we should be only listening Krishna Katha from the bona fide tradition. Because that's why Prabhupada is saying that Krishna has done it on purpose. He has instructed Brahma. He has instructed Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita. He's doing that for a reason. So we can take shelter from the right bona fide source, the tradition. So this is kind of like a very interesting thought that I just had while reading this purport. And there are many amazing things mentioned in the purport. The first thing would be the existence of the Lord is denied by the Mayavadis or many other religious, spiritual sects. So we should remember that, you know, it's just a very simple logic that comes to mind, you know. Anyone, if you can see a light, you can see a tube light, right? In this room there is a tube light. You can see the tube light, and you can see there is a light. And any intelligent person can tell there is no light by itself. It's coming from a source or a powerhouse. That's kind of explains everything itself. That the light is there. Krishna's light, the effulgence, the Brahma Jyoti is there. But it has to be coming. What is the point of having effulgence if no one's there to effulgenate the effulgence? You know what I mean? Like, how can there be effulgence without the person who is effulging that light? So there has to be a person behind it, and that is Krishna. So that is when we listen this transcendental knowledge from the bona fide sources, that's the first thing we get eradicated of, is the impersonal form feature of the Lord. That is not the highest goal. The highest goal is Krishna himself, which is present in the personal form. That is the highest self-realization. So we should take opportunity to read Bhagavatam, discuss Bhagavatam. Krishna's pastimes are very nice, and in the Prabhupada mentions that in Ayurveda also it has mentioned that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the existence of Krishna, right? Where does it say? There is one Supreme Person who is the progenitor of this cosmic manifestation, and whose energy acts as Prakriti, or the material nature, dazzling like a reflection. So when we see the reflection, we can see that it's not the personal feature. It is the reflection. It's illusory. Like we are in the material world, which is the illusory. And we are covered by the illusory energy of the Lord. This is a reflection of the spiritual world. In the Bible, we hear that man was created in the image of God, right? That's what we hear in the Bible. It says that the man was created in the image of God. Yes, in the image of God, which is reflection, on the reflection of the God. So we should remember that point, and we should not try to think ourselves as the God, because then that's just being greedy. That's just being, like Ganesham Prabhu was saying yesterday. We try to think ourselves as the God because we are just in darkest of ignorance. We are just thinking that I want to become superior to other people because we want to claim our position over other people, which we shouldn't be doing, because we should be humble. We should be tolerant. And we should be respectful, because we know that Krishna is in the heart of every living entity. Remember the verse in Bhagavad Gita where Krishna says that? I am situated in the heart of every living entity. Upadrishtanumantas, is that the one? Where it says, I am situated in the heart of every living entity? Yeah, so I think that's also the one where he says that. Yeah, about Super Soul. So, Super Soul, how do we understand that Super Soul is in the heart of every living entity? How do we understand that? We understand because Krishna is telling us. We can feel the connection. We can see the presence of Super Soul inside the heart of every living entity. But before we can do that, we have to purify. We have to go through a purification process. You can't just, that is like a higher level of consciousness when you can see everyone equally, like a perfect sage would see everyone, and not be disturbed by the mind and dualities of this material nature. Because whenever there is cold, there will be heat, as we are feeling the heat right now because of the heat wave. There will also be cold in some time, and then we will be feeling the cold because it's a dual world. It's duality. It's full of duality. So we should take whatever situation we are in to surrender and come closer to Krishna. And how do we do that? How do we come closer to Krishna? We come closer to Krishna by devotional service. That's the only way. Is there any other way you can come closer to Krishna that I don't know of? No. The only way that the Shastra and the spiritual transcendental literature are telling us, the only way to come closer to Krishna is by devotional service. Chant Krishna's name, discuss Krishna's pastimes, and remember Krishna at all times and engage all your senses in the service of the Lord. You can engage your 5 senses, 5 normal senses in the service, but if your mind is not engaged, then what's the point of engaging the other 5 senses? What's the benefit? Because the consciousness transformation will only come when we engage the leader of the 5 senses, which is the mind, right? The 6th sense. So I've been reading this beautiful song of Avanti Brahmana, and in that there's a beautiful text that Avanti Brahmana after. So I'll just give a little brief history of the story of the Brahmana. So there's this Brahmana in the city of Avanti. I don't know what's his name. It's just been known as Brahmana. So we'll just call him Mr. Brahmana. Right, in the village of, or in the city of Avanti. So Avanti Brahmana, this guy is a very miserly person because he is very attached to money and sense gratification. Well, actually he's not even attached to sense gratification. He just wants, he's like so miserly that he wants to get all the opulence and doesn't want to use it for himself. He just wants to accumulate, pretty much. Shri Shri Radha Gopinath ki jai. So this Brahmana spends all his time, all his young childhood, his youth and his adulthood in acquiring more possessions, and he has a family. And that family kind of hates him because he doesn't spend any money. He lives a very austere life, even though he's accumulating so much opulence. It's just amazing how people do that sometimes, eh? Like I remember I used to probably do that also. acquire more and more money, but then I would not spend. I would be like very, what's the word that I'm looking for? I'll be very thrifty. You can say, oh, very cheap. We'll spend only when it's absolutely necessary. We'll just make other people spend on us, Has anyone ever done that, or is it just me? Yeah? So this is how the material world works. So this is how we are caught up in the illusory energy. So this Brahmana was also like that, and he was caught up in not spending money even on sense gratification. What to speak of spending money on the Supreme Lord, in the service of the Supreme Lord. So this Brahmana, one day, gets in a lot of trouble. His family leaves him because of him being such a miserly person. And things just change, things arrange in such a way that all his wealth, all his opulence, all his monetary gain, everything's gone. Due to many different causes. Some part of the wealth is taken by the friends and families. Some is destroyed by natural causes like fire or something, No rain for his crops. So there's all these things, everything he has is gone. And now he's an old man. And he's sitting and he's thinking, he's just meditating upon how much time he spent to acquire all this, and how very little time it took for everything to just go away. So, and he's just meditating what's going on. He's in so much distress. And then he has an awakening inside. Because in his before being a miserly person, this Brahmana was a learned man. Shri Radha Gopinath ki jai. Was a very learned scholar and a very great man. So he knows the essence, the secret of life. But due to the influence of the material energy, he was caught up. So, we know this, that illusory energy of the Lord is very strong. It can catch us from where it wants us to. But the only way we can avoid being caught up by the illusory energy is when we take shelter of the Lord and His pious and sincere devotees. So, the Brahmana, being a learned person before becoming a miserly person, has this awakening within. He has this realization that all this has to happen for a reason. It cannot just happen randomly, because everything is controlled by the Supreme Lord. Then he thought that this is the mercy of the Supreme Lord, Krishna, that I have been put in this position. So now I can understand all the nonsense I've been doing in my life. I have wasted so much time in these useless lifestyle that I've been living. But now it's time for me to take shelter of the Supreme Lord and perform austerities and live a life of a sannyasi or a sage. So he has this realization, and then he sings this beautiful song, which is the chapter. And then in his songs, he's talking about the mind. That's the first thing he talks about, is the mind. How he said all these senses are controlled by one main sense, that is the mind. The mind is the controller of all other senses. So a person who has controlled the mind has automatically got control of rest of his senses. I think that's like one of the very deep lines that tells us that if you want to conquer, you got to conquer the mind. Once you conquer the mind, everything else will be under control. Right? It's the mind that gives us disturbance. He says all this happiness, distress, heat, cold, whatever situation we are in, disturbances from the demigods or happiness given us from the demigods and environment and whatever, it's all the disturbance of the mind. Really. How much can anyone else disturb you? It's your own mind that's disturbing you even more. So we should not listen or take shelter of the mind. Instead, we should take shelter and try to understand the person, the real person inside the body, which is the soul, the spirit soul, and connection of the spirit soul with the Supreme Lord, Krishna. So this is a very beautiful chapter in the 11th canto. I would recommend everyone to give it a read when they come to 11th canto with a little bit more sincerity, so we can understand the essence of this chapter, which is telling us how everything temporary will be left behind, and the only thing spiritual and permanent is you and Krishna. That's our relationship, right, with Krishna. Permanent relationship with Krishna. Not a temporary relationship, but a permanent relationship. So we should try to take shelter of Krishna as much as possible. And how do we do that in today's time when there's so much disturbances of the mind? How do we take shelter of Krishna more? And that point has been explained by Vritrasura in Bhagavatam. We will read about Vritrasura in which canto is Vritrasura pastime? 6th or 7th? 6th. So Vritrasura is talking that the only way you can give up all these attachments to material sense objects is by associating with the pious and sincere devotees of the Lord. Because these devotees are not just any ordinary people. These devotees are fully enlightened people, or trying to be enlightened people, and who are trying to be in the right path of Krishna consciousness. And with the association of these amazing devotees, we are able to cross this ocean of darkness, of the ocean of darkness, of darkness of material existence, which we all are stuck in. We're not stuck in, actually, we are put in this place. So the only way to cross this ocean is to ride through the boat with other devotees, led by our own spiritual master, who is our navigator, who is our driver of the boat, right? So that's the only way to do it. So, but you can try doing other ways. People have tried doing other ways, like jnanis and other yogis, mystic yogis, perform tapasya, perform austerities. But we all know that will not work in Kali Yuga. You can try as much as you want. It is not going to work. The only thing that works in Kali Yuga is chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Chanting Krishna's name. That's all would work. Even in other ages, devotees knew that. Like you take Kunti Maharani, for example, Queen Kunti. What was she doing when she was in so much distress? She didn't go up and did tapasya for 200 years, because she knew that wouldn't work. To help her eradicate the distress she was in, the only thing that would work is chanting, remembering Krishna, chanting the names of Krishna. And what did she say? What was the famous prayer that she chanted? Remembering names of Krishna. Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nanda Gopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Very simple prayer and very beautiful prayer. All she's saying is chanting the names of Krishna and remembering Krishna and paying her obeisances to Krishna. That's what a devotee does. Because for a devotee, Krishna is the only shelter. When if it's pain, pleasure, happiness, distress, Krishna is the only shelter. Whatever situation you're in, just try to take shelter of Krishna. Because what else can you do? Because you can eradicate this pain or happiness is just temporary, just for a little while. You can do something, it'll gone in no time. We know that, we have experience in the material world. I don't know if you have enough experience of that already, but I do. So I can tell you that temporary is temporary and permanent will always be permanent. So instead of taking shelter of the temporary, we should surrender and take shelter of what is permanent and which is the cause of all causes, Krishna. So I'd like to end here. It's 8:30. If there's any questions, comments, corrections. All right. Grantraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Jagat Guru Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Nitya Gaura Premanandi.